Hey everyone, it's Eugene Liscio, and welcome to Click 3D. This is the program where we talk about photogrammetry and how you can use your digital camera, take some photos, and then process it to create some really good-looking 3D models. As you know, a lot of times I do tutorials and that sort of thing, but more recently, just on the last episode, I did an interview, and I really enjoyed it quite a bit. And so we're going to continue on that. And today, my guest is Rita Omari. And she's a native of Kenya, where she studied her Bachelor of Forensic Science. But she completed her Master of Forensic Science from Murdoch University last year in Australia. And I had the pleasure of meeting her last week, and she did a poster presentation at the Canadian Society of Forensic Science conference. And her research focused on comparing and validating 3D photogrammetry against CT scanning and also caliper driven measurements, which is pretty much what a lot of anthropologists do. So she's hopeful that this is going to open the doors for a lot of different people for virtual anthropology, where you can sort of document something and then send it to people across the world. And I think this is probably the future. And I was really impressed with her presentation. So I'm going to bring her in here right now. Hi, Rita. How are you?
Hey Eugene, I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Yes, so just so people know, I'm in Toronto and you're somewhere, I think, in Perth, maybe, or am I
Yes,
wrong? Yeah.
Western Australia, yeah.
All right, Western Australia. So we are actually 12 hours apart.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's your evening and it's my morning. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
thanks for taking some time out of your evening.
My pleasure.
All right. So well, first off, let me ask you just a few questions about yourself. So you're a native of Kenya and you
Yeah.
studied. So where did you study forensic science?
So I studied my undergrad in Kenya, a university called Kenyatta University, and then came to Australia, Murdoch University, to do my master's.
Okay. So now you've been done, or you're looking at some continued education?
Done for now. Probably gonna continue down the line, probably, but yeah, I'm trying to kind of relax for now. It's just been a few months, okay, half a year since I finished. So
Yeah, yeah.
trying to figure that out, but definitely more studies in the near future. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. And I'm sure it's a little tricky with the whole COVID situation and everything else.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, sure. So let me ask you about your studies, or what areas in forensic science are you most interested in?
Um, Initially that was like pathology. But I discovered a little too late that you have to like start from medicine before you finally go down into pathology. So who knows? I might end up going into medicine. Who knows? Anyhow, that's an
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
abstract future. But for now, I guess toxicology, and most recently, since my project, like camera stuff, so crime scene photography, and the world of possibilities that opened after my project was just amazing. So
Yeah,
yeah, I'm kind of interested in seeing what more I can do with my project, how far we can take it,
right.
basically. So
Oh, good.
yeah,
So where did you first hear about photogrammetry?
probably in my master's,
Mhm.
and most specifically, or rather more intimately, when I got my project. So how we pick our projects in Murdoch is that you're given a list of projects and you pick your top three, and then you're assigned one, based on either GPA or whatever. So when I saw 3D photogrammetry, I was like, "Oh, that sounds cool." That sounds so.
Yeah,
Yeah, it sounds so cool.
yeah.
So I think that's when I actually got intimately acquainted with it, I would say. So that was like 3 years ago when I first like got a proper concept of what it's about.
Okay. Now, did you look at different software at the time, or did you just did somebody recommend one? Because I know you used at the time, well, I don't know if it was still called Metashape then, or if it was called PhotoScan, but
Yeah,
um,
at the time it was called Photoscan actually. So
yeah.
I was doing a follow-up study of one of my co-authors, Cahill,
Hmm.
Cale Hunt. So he kind of started on it. So I was kind of refining his project and so forth. And so it's what he did. So I think at the time it made sense to continue with Metashape for like the continuity and so that we could compare our studies and stuff. So yeah, it's the one I've mostly worked with so far.
Okay. Well, I've been a long time photogrammetry user. So when I saw your presentation, I was like, okay, this is definitely one I have to look at. So I did go through your paper, and you did a really great job. Um,
Thank you.
I think one of the interesting things, and I'm not sure if you realize this too, but I sort of make a joke all the time saying that you'll never hear a joke that starts, "Did you hear about the rich anthropologist?" or something like that, because that's one of the benefits of photogrammetry is that it's low
Yeah.
cost, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's very portable.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, as students, students don't exactly always have a big source of funding
Budget.
all the time.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's often a problem. So photogrammetry is a great option for a lot of people doing their masters, and I've assisted on a few students that also did some photogrammetry projects
Mm-hmm.
in anthropology. So I think it's great. Now, was there? You obviously focused on the skulls, and so what I'll tell you that. Well, let me ask you this: why don't you just give me a brief description of your project and what you did, so people can understand how you approach this?
All right. So we basically wanted to validate photogrammetry. So, like in forensic, there's of course the Dorbert standard of evidence in court for it to be admissible in court. So we
Hmm.
wanted to validate photogrammetry in the context of forensic anthropology, so that like when evidence, like photogrammetry-based evidence, is taken to court, it can be accepted as, real and stand on its own without needing that much backing. So photogrammetry has, of course, already previously been used in like crime scene reconstruction and matching like wounds to like the inflicting tools and stuff, but we realized that it hasn't really been used in the context of forensic anthropology. So that's what motivated our project. And we do have cameras in school, but we were thinking future, like if it's like fast responders, when they go to a scene, they don't always carry around the cameras with them. So we thought of using our mobile phone cameras to capture the photographs.
Hmm.
So we had three scouts to represent different populations basically, and to just have that variety. So we had three scouts and we had four observers, two who are experts, who are like knew what photogrammetry was, and two who are like lay people who did not know about it at all. So from the three scouts, we were taking measurements in triplicate using vernier calipers, and then of course in the software, in the photogrammetry software, and from the scans we obtained from the CT scanning.
Right. Okay.
And then like statistically compare the results to see if they were comparable and whether there was any significant difference between the measurements, so that at the end of the day we can say that, okay, probably physical measurements are the most accurate, or CT scanning or photogrammetry. So that was basically what we were trying to look at. And
Right.
at the end of the study, we discovered that there was no significant difference across the method. So it did not matter whether you decided to use photogrammetry or CT scanning or physical measurements, you would still get accurate enough results.
Right. Now, I think it's great that you decided to choose a mobile phone, and you probably would have
Yeah,
gotten like really nice results with with an expensive digital camera or something. But you make a really
yeah.
good point, and that is that it's right there. I just did a lecture the other day, and I asked everybody, "How many of you have a 3D scanner with you?" And everybody was quiet, and then I say, "Well, how many of you have one of these?" And everybody was like, "Yeah, okay. Well, this is the instrument that's used to document." So
Yeah.
in a way, you actually do have a way of locking everything away. And of course, if something happens right away, if you're caught in a situation where you just don't have the expensive tools, it's portable and it's mobile. It's great. How did you approach in the paper when I was reading? You sort of took different numbers of photographs for different skulls, or you tried to approach the photography in a structured manner. So, can you tell me a little bit about the way that you documented the skulls?
Sure. So we decided to have the scout stationary. So it was we who were taking or rather, it was me who was taking the photographs, who was mobile. Most often than not, there's like cameras around the skull that take, photos of the skull and record the skull and stuff. But this time we decided to stand our skulls through the base of the skull on a stand, and then we took a series of photographs. So three, like in three sets, around the top of the head, and then straight up, and then from the base to cover like the overhead, like the top of the head, and all around the face and the base of the skull.
Okay.
So that's how we approached it. And so from Kale's previous study, whose study I was following, he took a lot of photographs, like he had very minimal overlap. And we discovered that created a corresponding increase in the amount of time that was needed to like process and to come up with the scans. So we decided to reduce the overlap, because basically, so long as an aspect of the skull is visible in two or more photos, you're able to reconstruct it.
Okay. So when you say minimal, when you say Cahill, you said minimal overlap, but you mean he had a lot of overlap, so he had a lot of photographs?
Yes.
Okay. So like, the space between was, you increased
one photograph and the next was very, very small. So we kind of spaced that out and ended up with less photographs, obviously. And a faster, like, I think a full reconstruction took less than 10 minutes, maybe 5 to 7 minutes for a full reconstruction. So it greatly cut the work by like a lot.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And in terms of processing time, again, you said you were using Metashape. So about how long did it take to process those models afterwards?
Honestly, once we mostly just worked with the reconstruction as was. As you'll see in the paper, we took like a screenshot of the interface that we're working with, or rather the skulls as we're working with them. So literally from the recreating the skull, yes, that. So we worked with it when it was at that stage. So from when we were inputting the photographs and aligning and doing everything, in less than 7 minutes, we had a scan ready to work with. We had a reconstruction ready to work with. So yeah, it was pretty fast.
Okay. And were you using a turntable to document the skull, or were you just moving around the skull?
I myself was moving around the skull manually.
Okay. So did you put it on some kind of a like, did you have it in the middle of a floor or something that you could move around?
So it was in the middle of a well-lit room. So we also tried to ensure, there was minimal shadows and all that, optimum conditions for photography to ensure like minimal shadows and consistent lighting. So thankfully it was like a room with like white walls. So like it balanced out pretty well.
Right.
Yeah, so the skull was in the middle of the room and elevated on the stand, and yeah, I was the one who was going around taking like around the skull, taking the photographs.
Okay. Now you took a number of different measurements once you processed the skull, and from different things. So what are some of the more challenging measurements to take by hand, and how did that compare to photogrammetry?
By hand, I would say there was one of the measurements that was like from around the bridge of the nose to the back of the head. So because none of us are like expert anthropologists, okay? So like this was the first time we're trying to deal with this. So the fact that these are measurements that you kind of read about and have to try and approximate on your own, that was quite challenging. So what I would consider as the back of the head for me and for the next person would be different,
right,
depending on your own judgment. So the fact that the points are kind of, would I say, imaginary, like they're not set, right?
They're subjective.
Exactly, they're very subjective depending on who is doing the measurement. And like in my paper, there was the section of where errors arise. And so there was one of the when I was doing the research, one of the recommendations was kind of to put dot points on the places that you think the region is or where the landmark is, but that would introduce bias, because then someone will just go, oh, it's from here to here, and you would kind of get roughly the same measurements every time. But we wanted to remove that bias, so it was more of giving people a guideline of, so these are the landmarks we're using, and here is like a photographic representation of where they lie.
Hmm.
And this is how you do the measurements. And from there, you just let them do their own thing uninterrupted to avoid introducing any bias.
Yeah.
So yeah, because of the subjective nature. So especially the one that was like from the bridge of the nose to the back of the skull, and the one that's like around the skull from temple to temple. Those two are pretty problematic, if
Yeah,
I can
sure.
say.
Well, the
Yeah.
problem there, though, of course, isn't a photogrammetry problem, right? It's a problem
Yeah.
of actual the measurement and trying to come up with a
Yes.
way to say, okay, if
Yes.
if there was a way to say, okay, start at this point, move down, 30% of
Mm.
the way, and then take a measurement. So that's
Yeah.
that's an issue, I think, in just because of the variation of the human skull, because of maybe the way anthropologists define it or whatever. And
Yeah.
I love my anthropologist friends, but they are notorious for saying this looks curved, or this is smooth, or this is rough. And so it's being able to
Yeah.
quantify something is really, really important, I think. And I think
Yes.
that's part of what your work is showing here.
Yes.
Um,
100%. Yeah.
so let me ask about the final model and all the measurements. Did you take all of those measurements inside of Metashape, or did you take it in another program?
For the photogrammetric measurements, we took all of them in Metashape. All
Okay.
the photogrammetric measurements that we used for comparison were taken in Metashape. And then there's some measurements that were taken in, it's called the DICOM viewer that views the CT scans, but that was like for the purpose of taking the CT scan measurements.
Okay.
But all the photogrammetry measurements were taken in Metashape.
And the CT scan, was that done at the university? They have a CT scanner?
Yes, so we have an animal hospital in the school, and they were kind enough to allow us to use their CT scanner. So yeah, we did it from Murdoch as well.
Okay, well, that's great. It's nice that you had access to that.
Yeah.
And so tell us about how did they compare? So how did things compare? What was the good? What was the bad?
Honestly, so we did, of course, intrarata, interrata, and ANOVA, and relative technical error measurements. And all the measurements, so there was only, I think, one or two measurements that had a significant difference.
Hmm.
And we were able to explain that because for one of the observers I was using, first of all, this was a very tedious process because all the measurements have to be taken in triplicate, both with the calipers and in the software, and with the CT scan, all the measurements have to be taken in triplicate. So it was a very time-consuming process.
Hmm.
And one of my observers at some point had some kind of personal problem. So it was like, I just want to get it over with, where is it? And she just does her thing and leaves, without really paying attention. So we kind of boiled it down to that because it was only one or two measurements that had a significant difference.
Okay.
But otherwise, for all the other measurements across all the three scales and across all the three methods, we had all the like coefficients of variance were like 0.998 and upwards. So that was a
Right.
very, very good result.
Yeah.
Very good result. And yeah, and as you said, photogrammetry, considering these were people who had never come across photogrammetry or the software and had to be given a crash program on it, at the end of the
Yeah.
day, trying to kind of advocate for how easy it is to use. It doesn't necessarily need an expert. So long as you
Hmm.
have some training in it, then you can operate the photogrammetric software, which was evident from our study, from the untrained observers.
Yeah. Let me ask you about there were some things that you mentioned in the paper. So for example, one thing that you mentioned was about the fact that with calipers, there may be some limitations, whereas when you have a 3D model, there may be things that are easier to do than when you just have calipers. Like what kinds of things were you thinking of in that regard?
So I was thinking more of if you bones, depending on how well they're preserved in the ground and how long they've been there and the kind of conditions that they have been exposed to, they
Hmm.
have different levels of fragility when they are discovered. So if you're able to document them in situ using your phone or camera or whatever it is and reconstruct them in 3D, you're able to manipulate them more as compared to when you actually collect them and they begin like breaking or disintegrating because of how long they have been untouched or how long they've been exposed to the elements of the weather.
Right.
So it's mostly in terms of maintaining the integrity of the remains. Then 3D photogrammetry is very handy. And the fact that these are photographs that are stored and can be pulled up anytime to go back and revisit. And, if there's a point you missed or whatever it is, you can pull it up anytime to relook and to reanalyze, as
Right.
compared to if you collect the remains and anything breaks, then the integrity is lost. And there's nothing you can do about that. It's irreversible.
Right. Yeah, you might like this. A few years back, I did a project with a student for it was a research project that they had to do where we took pig skulls, and what we did was we scanned them, and
Mhm.
then now we didn't use photogrammetry, but we scanned them, and then we broke them, so we crushed them, and then
Mhm.
we scanned all individual pieces and then put it back together. And what we were looking for was, how accurately can you put the puzzle back together versus,
Mhm.
the original model. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And there's also different types of analysis or
Yeah.
analyses that you can do on a 3D model that you just can't do with a set of
With the physical
calipers.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, so those types of things. There was a paper that I did in a student who is now actually in Australia, but she's in at Sydney.
Mhm.
Um, and what we did was we looked at some of the features, and I'm not an anthropologist, so it's like I think it's called the gonial angle. There's the
Mhm.
nasal aperture. There's all these different things that you can come up with ways to do things
Yeah.
that are more. How can I say this? That are more standardized. They're less subjective,
Mhm.
right? So I think
Yeah.
that's a great. This is also a great sort of opportunity and window that you've presented here. What about just? Did you think about? You mentioned virtual anthropology, right? You said it's like virtual.
Mhm.
So have you thought about how to present these models or how you give them to people and stuff? So I don't know if you did anything outside of Metashape or if you tried to export them at all, but did you give that any thought at all?
So I think at the time we're just elated that it worked. But I think that's now the next stage that I'm looking at with my co-author, like what more can we do? At the time we were just thinking about if the anthropologist is in Australia and I'm trying to consult someone who's in Switzerland and I can't necessarily travel or the remains can't go to them. So what can we do? And at the
Hmm.
time, I think that's what we're thinking. You can export the 3D model that you create in Metashape. I'm just not sure. The question, no, we did not work with any other software. So I'm not sure whether you can like import software from Metashape into a different software and whether it will work. That's definitely something I think we really need to look into. But there's just the concept of if that does not work, you can always send the photographs in their entirety and they can reconstruct it with whatever software they have.
Yeah,
At the end of the day,
definitely.
as long as you have your photographs and they are not compressed in any way, you just send them as they are, the original sizes and everything, then they're able to reconstruct it. But the like whether you're able to cross use data from one software to another is definitely something we need to look into.
Yeah, you definitely should, and it's absolutely open. I can tell you for sure that
Yeah.
you can export the model, and then it's like the world is your oyster. What do you want to do with it? So if you want to bring
Mm.
it into you could make it like a virtual reality project where it could be, you can have this massive skull in front of you and you can interact with it and things like that. You could
Yeah.
even now, like you could probably take the models and just put them online. There's a website called Sketchfab where people often upload models and they share them with the community.
Hmm.
There are like I think the Smithsonian, and there's other people that have small collections that they put up there
Yes.
too. That
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, so it's nice to be able to share or 3D print, right? You can
Hmm.
3D print models. In fact, I got stuff back here, but for example, this is the lower jaw of a of
Oh.
a of a cat, right? So,
Hmm.
but we've done other things. I don't have the big skull in front of me, whatever, but a lot of good stuff. So I think you have. Yeah, I think you definitely have some opportunities if you are going to continue your studies. I guess you have to figure out now what you want to do.
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Well, look,
Yeah.
I think that's great. I really enjoyed your project. I thought you did a good job on the reconstructions. I thought that the
Thank
results were
you.
very, very promising. And yeah, what can I say other than thank you for taking the time to speak here. Yeah, like I said, I hope you don't give it up. I hope you continue with your studies, or you find some work. Maybe you'll find some work. That would be nice too, right?
That will be nice too. But with regards to continuing, definitely we're looking into it. And I mean, having interacted with amazing people like you, and there's a lot of like online communities of forensic science where I've come across a lot of people. And it's good to the networking aspect of it, so that you know that if I have a question and it's not my strong suit, it's not my forte, I can ask someone else. So that has also been like an amazing kind of thing to stumble upon over the past month or so. So definitely, where I will be insufficient, I know I have help. I know like there's people out there I can ask.
Hmm.
So yeah, that has also been a very good takeaway from the last month or so. So
Excellent, excellent.
yeah,
All right, well, do me a favor. I'm just going to say a few closing words. Just hang back for a second, and then I'll come back and
perfect.
I'll chat with you after. Thanks a lot, Rita. I really appreciate
All
it.
right. Thank you for having me.
All right, take care. All right, folks. Well, that does it. Really interesting project. I love seeing that kind of thing with research. I can't really emphasize how important it is for students and postgraduate students to be doing research in many different areas, not just with photogrammetry or whatever. It's just a fantastic way of learning. It's a way of pushing yourself and pushing the limits of a particular area of study or discipline, and it really helps to make a contribution. So, I'm hoping maybe in the future that I'll be doing more interviews like this and getting student research out there. So that does it for this episode of Click 3D. I want to thank everybody for your attention, and we'll see you next time. Take care.